All right. Hello, everyone.
Hello?
This is an online discussion, and we are resuming these sessions after a very long time. The host for these sessions is MELO, the Society for the Study of the Multi-Ethnic Literatures of the World. Those of you who are not familiar with the society would know that we've been around for some time. For some time, that means we've been around since 1997. That's a long time. So calculate how many years does it make? We are 27 years old. And in these 27 years, we have a lot of members who keep coming and going. Some are floating, some are permanent. And well, we have conferences regularly, once in a year, certainly, sometimes twice, and a lot of other activities also going on. Now, through Mello, we have not really had these online discussions. So this is the first for us. And a lot of volunteers, a lot of would-be speakers have shown their interest in joining our sessions, in being speakers, talking about the things that interest them. We hope to meet at least fortnightly to begin with, but maybe every week if we can manage it, depending on the support we get from our group. Now, this is the first of the series, and we begin this series with somebody very interesting. Hey, Martin, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Professor. Hello.
Yes, yes. So, folks, this is Professor Martin Fusi. Professor Martin Fusi lives in California, and I must tell you what happened because I thought he was still in California, and I told him your session is going to begin in the morning at 5:30, but he was in the UK, and apparently he told me, and I didn't remember or I got confused, and Martin has been up for a long, long time since 5:40 in the morning LA time. Um, I thought it was LA time, but he's been awake for a long time. Martin, don't you dare go to sleep now, right?
No, I won't. Thank you.
Okay, so let me formally introduce Professor Martin Fusi. He lives in California near Los Angeles. He is from Babanki Tungo. If my pronunciation is wrong, please let me know, Martin. So he's from Babanki Tungo in the northwest region of Cameroon. He studied at Catholic School, Big Mancon, Sacred Heart College, Bamenda, and CCASD Bambili before obtaining his BA and Maitris in English at Yaoundé University. You know, these names, some of these names are now familiar. For instance, I did not know anything about Yaoundé before I met these interesting people like Martin Fusi and some other friends from Cameroon. He studied at Hull University in the UK, and there he graduated with an MA in theatre and media production and PhD in African literature. He has taught at various universities in the United States, including George Washington University and the College of William and Mary, the University of Southern California, California State University, San Bernardino, and a lot of other places. You haven't taught in any Indian universities. I think it's high time you make a beginning in our country also, Martin. He teaches creative writing, screenwriting, film production, theater, and film directing, among other subjects. So, Martin, welcome. Welcome to this platform. It's great to
Thank
have
you
you
very
here.
much.
And today, Martin will give us an overview of the development of contemporary drama in sub-Saharan Africa. He will focus on Wole Soyinka and then go on to discuss Bole Butake's Lake God. So I know we may not be familiar with Bole Butake, but that's what Martin is here for. So welcome, Martin. Would you like to say something to our audience before you begin your talk? The idea is that you will talk for a while and then there'll be a Q&A round. And then
Okay.
in that Q&A round, we'll probably ask you about the interesting things that you are doing. I know about some of them, but I'm sure our audience would love to hear about them. Okay,
Okay.
Martin, over to you.
Thank you very much, Professor. This is a wonderful opportunity you've given me. And yes, you're right. We all got the time issues a little bit overlapping, and so I've been up. But this has been exciting. Thank you all very much. This is a wonderful opportunity for me to talk about sub-Saharan African theater. And thank you very warmly for what a wonderful introduction, Professor. About I didn't even realize you were talking about me. So I really appreciate that. Um, yeah, so uh, theater, I decided to talk about Bollywood and indeed sub-Saharan African theater because and its development in contemporary African literary studies because although there is general interest in it, in recent times there has not been that much that has gone in the African scene to take it around the world and to make people understand it even more. So this is a heaven sent opportunity for me. So thank you very much, Professor. Um, for those of us who are into post-colonial studies, um, and Commonwealth studies, again, the situation in Africa more or less is the same. Sub-Saharan African theater developed uh, out of European, colonization. And in my case, for instance, I also speak French because in Cameroon, we have a mixture of French and English background. So if we study a little bit about how the French were in Africa, their politics is kind of different. Their politics is based on assimilation, while, as we know, the English politics was based on association. And the French, when they came to Africa, as opposed to the English, they they wanted to make what we call pure black Frenchmen. So they looked at Africa not as a colony, but as a part of France, which indeed they still do. And for those of us who are more into African politics today, it's a big deal what's actually happening because many African countries that are French speaking actually have French troops military there. And so in recent times, there's been this kickback against it. So most of these troops are going back to France. So it's kind of this is actually a very, very interesting time now in African politics. And why the situation in Cameroon is a little bit complex is because part of the country was, I don't want to say annexed, but after the First World War, part of the country was given by the League of Nations to England after the Germans had been defeated because Cameroon was actually annexed by Germany. But after the Germans were defeated, part of the country was given to Britain and the larger part was given to France. So in inside one country, you have two different colonialist approaches. And for most people, from India or the United Kingdom or Australia, any country that is English speaking, they would understand more the English speaking part of Cameroon. The history kind of follows more or less what we understand in post-colonial studies. But in French speaking Cameroon, it's totally different. Literally in those days, now things have changed. When I was growing up, when you came to Cameroon, it was as if you were in two different countries. And one part, everybody spoke English, one part, everybody spoke French. But now there's kind of a conflict going on in the country because the English speaking, myself being one of them, feel kind of marginalized by the French speaking. So it has created a lot of tension. And recently there's a skirmish going on. And in the last like 3 to 5 years, and it kind of has torn the country apart a little bit. So these things, this the reality in Cameroon today. Now, I wanted to. use Shoinka because Wole Shoinka, I don't know if most of you have heard of him, but Wole
Yeah,
Shoinka is a
yeah.
lot more well known uh,
Mm,
uh, a theater activist from Nigeria. I just briefly wanted to use him to introduce Cameroon, and if you read Wole Soyinka's plays, like Death and the King's Horseman or the Jiro Brothers or The Road, all of these plays tend to deal with a society in a state of change, and mostly in Nigeria,
yeah.
and that's the same with Cameroon. So I felt that Soyinka was a name that people at least have heard, and Botake, many people have not. So I wanted to use Soyinka just as a springboard to Bola Botake, so you would understand, generally speaking, what kind of a playwright he was. He's of late now, and I'm proud to say that I was his student in the 80s. Yeah.
May I intervene? Bole
Yes, Professor.
Butake, that is what I read. He is a professor, right? He's a professor in a department of English. And is he still teaching?
Well, he passed away. He passed
Oh, that's so
away.
sad. Yeah,
Yes, he
okay.
died. I would say about 5 or 6 years ago. But
Mhm.
up until he died, he was a professor, yes, in Yaoundé University. Up until he died, yeah.
Right, right. Okay. So sorry I interrupted, but you were talking about languages, the Francophone and Anglophone part of Cameroon. What about the local languages? Maybe you could talk about that
Yes,
also.
absolutely. And these are the kind of things that Butake discusses in his play, and we'll kind of just meander into the play as we talk about language. And I'm sure, Professor, and most of the listeners here being from India, you will quicker understand what I'm about to say than the average listener who's not familiar with language patterns. Cameroon is the size, I don't know, it's not as big as India, but we always say it's the size of California. So if you have the map of California in your mind, you will know what it's like. So it's about 3 times the size of Great Britain. So that would give you an idea. And it has within its frontiers, for a country that small, there are over 300 languages spoken. And and each some languages are as different from each other as English is from French. And so um, because there's so many languages spoken within its frontiers, English, French, and what we call Pidgin English, which is a Creole language, have become the three languages that are dominant within the country that many people can use, since unless you come from each little individual community, you will not be able to understand somebody from another community. So the Western language has become that which unites, or in many cases, disunites people and creates conflict. For if you catch the irony in the whole situation. So this is something that Wole Soyinka, if you read some of his plays like The Road, uh, um, um, kind of alludes to when he used a bit of Pidgin English. But I'll now take this chance to meander into Bole Butake's Lake God, which is the play I want to discuss. Now, for those of us who like doing research, if you, after this talk, if you have the chance to Google, in 1985, in Cameroon, in 1985, which is, I mean, I can't believe it's 40 years ago now, um, a, a, a disaster happened. A lake mysteriously exploded called Lake Neos. It mysteriously exploded and emitted a poisonous gas that killed over 3,000 people instantly. And even as we speak today, 40 years later, there's still a lot of even scientists don't really agree as to what caused this mysterious explosion. Lakes don't just explode. They don't just emit gas overnight and kill X number of people like that. But anyway, in 1985, that's what happened. So Butake wrote this play as his own interpretation of what could have led to the incidents of that lake exploding. So um, that's why I had to give you a bit of background with regards to society in Cameroon today as we speak. The play was originally written in English. It has been translated into French and a few other languages, but it was originally written in English. And I'm proud to say when the play first came out, I was a young aspiring actor at the time, and I played the lead role for quite a few years. And Butake directed me; he was my director, and I played the lead role of this traditional priest who it is alleged had been going around the community telling people something weird was going to happen and that sacrifices had to be performed. And if these sacrifices were not performed, the gods of the lake would get angry since they've not been fed. And yet people, the local ruler, a fon, which is kind of a chief, a king of that little community, did not particularly listen to this traditional rite. He believes more in, you know, the westernization, which is epitomized by the presence of a priest. And this priest, a Catholic priest, um, advises the chief not to listen to this traditional witch doctor, and that times are changing now, and Christianity or Islam or whatever other religion we have is what reigns in Africa right now, rather than any animist local traditional beliefs. So while the people in the village who have, including the chief's wife, people get more confused now. Do they listen to the Catholic priest who's white, or do they listen to this traditional witch doctor? And so that conflict there, and basically because the fund did not do any, the fund, which is a chief, hesitates in listening to God, the traditional priest. By the time anything could happen, the lake explodes and everyone dies. At the end, the traditional doctor and a couple of a young child and a young man and a young boy, a young girl, and the traditional doctor are just among the few people who survive. Everybody else dies. So that's the story in brief, the lake god. But inside it, obviously, the first thing we see is the role of ritual in not in Cameroon. It's still ritual still plays a dominant role in many aspects of society, even though the society in Cameroon, like many other places in Africa, many other countries actually, have been westernized. There's still a reliance a lot on ritual to explain the inexplicable and and to basically understand the inexplicable. And so ritual still plays a very, very dominant role in uh, in um, in society and politics today. Um, and if you urbanization, as we know, rural exodus is a big thing, not only in many African countries, but in many countries all over. So when you go to the average Cameroonian or indeed African city, it's kind of a mishmash of very many people from different parts of the country who speak different languages and who come from different ritualistic and traditional backgrounds, all together in one place. Yes, Professor. Oh, I cannot hear you.
Yes,
Oh,
I mean, I must intervene again because
yeah.
I want to tell you that, whatever you're saying is resonating very well with me and also with our audience, because just as you say there are 300 languages in a small country like Cameroon, we have any number of languages and dialects in our country, and we all,
Yes.
we all learn to survive. We all learn to live together. And secondly, what you talked about, the lake god and something strange happening, and this warning coming that something terrible is going to happen. The lake being treated as a god. This is something that we in India also believe it, because we believe in the mountain god and the hill goddess and so on. So we have our gods and goddesses, we have our languages, just as you have them in Cameroon, right? So
Yeah.
I just wanted you to know that the audience that you have, I'm sure, understands you perfectly. Please carry on, Martin.
Thank you. Yes, that's why at the beginning I said, being from India, most of you are going to quickly catch exactly what I'm saying because of, in a very weird way, the same background. So, um, what what makes this play more interesting is that inside the play, the playwright is also poking a finger at one dominant political perspective. Because, as I explained earlier, Cameroon, there are two languages in Cameroon. So officially, if you visit Cameroon today, officially, the two official languages are English and French. But the French language and the French culture in Cameroon, they're more, the French speaking part is bigger and more dominant. And so what Butake is doing here is in a way also poking a finger at that dominant culture. So yes, the dominant religion, as we say, is Christianity, and as epitomized by the priest, but he's also poking a finger at a dominant culture, which is French speaking, and which he feels is making the English speaking part claustrophobic. So the traditional priest is unable to perform his ritualistic functions because of a much more bigger culture that breeds on him and refuses him to um to express himself and for the people to express themselves for what they really are. So there's two things at play here. While Otake is poking a finger at westernization, he's also looking at a very kind of a post structuralist, post colonialist Africa today, and that in some people, there are some sections of society who still point a finger at the West for many of Africa's problems. But one of the things he's saying here is that sometimes the finger should be pointed at yourself for some of the problems. Now we Okay, fair enough. These new countries, I think Africa has 54, I believe, or 55 countries, um, are all independent and everything. These countries have been created. There's nothing else you can do about it. That's the reality. But what now happens is up to you because we are all independent, I suppose. So that's the second thing that Butake is trying to bring out in this particular play. He's written other plays. He wrote about 7 or 8 plays, but I decided to focus on this one because not only was it his second play, but it's the first of his writings where he explores society as it is, especially in English speaking Cameroon, and then he inside it discusses certain post-structuralist views that exist today in the country. Now, one other thing I like about Butake is that when you read his play, it at one level it's very academic, but also at another level it's very down to earth. So that the audience, he had his audience in mind, and he wanted to get in touch with very many people in the community and didn't want to frighten them away with verbose language or with something very difficult that people will not be able to quickly understand. And furthermore, um, I don't know, Professor, if you're familiar with the works of Augusto Boal. So Augusto Boal was this Brazilian theorist who I had the pleasure of knowing, as a matter of fact. He's of late now, and he wrote a book called it's just escaped my mind now. Um, but what he does is yes.
Can you put the name on the in the chat box?
Where's the chat box?
At the
Right
bottom,
here.
find a icon. Yeah,
Okay.
the name
August.
of the writer, critic.
Yes. Augusto Boal. He wrote a book called Theater of the Oppressed.
Mhm.
And that book
Okay,
is
theatre.
very,
Okay.
very for theater,
Mhm.
anybody who's a theater,
Theatre
and
of the
indeed,
Oppressed. Mhm.
yes, it's a very, very
Right.
well-known book. And
Mhm.
so Boal in Theater of the Oppressed is trying to practicalize theater. It's one of the first time that somebody actually questions the Aristotelian perspective of theater and
Mhm.
comes up with a totally different theatrical theory. And so because he came up with words like spectator, which it's kind of like, and I'm sure in India you will understand this very well because you definitely practice it. It's kind of like using theater in very practical situations, and
Mhm.
and um, as opposed to sitting and watching a play in a proscenium arch, like I'm watching a Shakespearean play or something. It's more about theater within the community. And so one of the things that Butake does is he's into what we call theater for conscientization and theater for mobilization, which is where you use theater to conscientize people about who they are and then to mobilize them into action. Uh, it may be, we are all sick today and let's do something to get well. There's a famous play by a guy called Olarotimi, who is Nigerian, and he wrote, it's called The Gods Are Not to Blame. And it is his own interpretation of Sophocles' Oedipus Rex. And he puts a Sophocles Oedipus Rex in an African situation. So Olarotimi.
Yeah, put it in the chat box, please. Yeah. Ola Rotimi.
Yeah. And the title of that play is The Gods Are Not to Blame. It's kind of what we call intertextuality of Sophocles' Oedipus Rex. So
Mhm.
he wrote it from a Nigerian perspective. So Butake he espouses this perspective of theater. And so there's something in Cameroon and indeed in West Africa called theater for development.
Okay.
And I'm very, very sure it's practiced in India, because when I was back home, I know that in India there were some specialists there who used to come and teach us. So I know that it is there. I just have this was years ago, and I haven't. I've forgotten some of the names of these people. But theater for development is kind of theater for conscientization and mobilization from an African perspective. So what Butake is doing in Lake God he's trying to conscientize people about their rights, about who they are, and not forget their origins, not forget their role in a rapidly changing African uh, stratosphere, if I may use that word. He's making people understand the contemporary politics of the countries in which they live, and he's trying to get them to understand the changes that are going on within the very fabric of their society and how important they as people are to everyday politics, to everyday life, to everyday economics, indeed to everyday living structures in the country. So, so we shouldn't sit back and think that it's those people at the top who, who would make the laws, who do everything. We are all part of a government. We are all part of a whole. And when this whole doesn't hold, when there are breaks in this whole, when things crack, then we have catastrophes. Then we have uh, um, situations like we had in Yos, where a lake explodes and X number of people lose their lives. And so everybody has to be in sync for 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 a society to move ahead. If you look at Wally Shoyinka's Death and the King's Horseman, for instance, of which some people think it's fight between colonization and tradition of the Yoruba, but it's a little bit more complex than that, especially as he himself, Shoinka, has said. But if you look at that play, there are elements of issues that have happened in society and rituals that are being broken. And when rituals are not there to keep society together, that's what happens. And so what Butake is saying in a bigger perspective is that with the coming of contemporary cities and as we know them and contemporary life as we know them in many African countries, at least in Cameroon, many of these ritualistic patterns are losing their luster. They are losing their significance among people. And when that happens, do we have societies that now have conflict within them? And one of the examples I normally use, simplistic examples for my students when I used to teach, was today, for instance, if I have a headache, at least in America, we say, can you take some Motrin, and you can take some Motrin or Tylenol or anything in America for your headache. You just drink it and you think, okay, I'm gonna get well, and then suddenly your headache is not there. But what, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, in many African communities, there was no Tylenol. You didn't have Tylenol you could go get a leaf and rub it. And so, but what would prevent you in most African societies, they didn't cure the headache by creating Tylenol. They cured the headache by listening to ritual, and I'm sure as Indians you'll appreciate this, by listening to ritual, performing rituals which will stop the whole community from having headache in the first place. So you once you perform this, the whole community people will not have headaches. So you don't have to now go and try to make Tylenol or Motrin that you'll drink. No, perform a ritual, cleanse your community, and once you cleanse your community, then you'll rid it of ills, you would rid it of sicknesses, you would rid it of anything that is there to antagonize and indeed bring down barriers within that community. So these are the kind of things that in his play, and indeed in many, especially English speaking plays, like Olaro, to me, I've just given you the name, Wale Soyinka from Nigeria, um, Botake from Cameroon, these playwrights from these former English speaking colonies uh, delve into that. Now, I don't want to use this chance to talk about a French speaking Africa. That is a whole different uh, um, uh, philosophical perspective. It's a whole different colonial perspective, because if you read plays by, or even literature by French speaking Cameroonians, it approaches these issues from a totally different perspective, because the psyche of the French speaking Africa, at least 20, 30, 40 years ago, maybe even longer, was that they were a part of France. They were not a colony of France. The French people didn't consider they had colonies. they knew that in French they say la France outre-mer, which in English is translated as France overseas. So when the French went to colonize, they called their colonies overseas French, not colonies. So they considered it part of France. And so they have a totally different approach to colonialism. And for those of you who maybe some other time, if I get a chance, we may talk about negritude and assimilation and the likes of Leopold Senghor and from Senegal and what they did. But that's a whole different thing. Um, so in brief, I didn't want to be that long, and I'd like more question and answer session. But in brief, that's what Lake God is about. Just and I actually happened to be in Cameroon at the time that particular lake exploded. I would say about 20 or 30 miles away from where I lived. So I know the story very well, and I was part of the troupe when Butake did the play. I used to be a member of the National Theatre in Cameroon many, many years ago. So I'm fully familiar with all of these, and I'm also fully familiar with a nation in a state of change, which Cameroon is, just like the average African country. So I hope I've made some kind of sense, and at least I wanted this to be some kind of introduction to African theater. I didn't want to go into too much detail, but just to give you an overview of sub-Saharan African theater. So if you ever get a chance to read a play or any novels from this part of the world, at least you have a general idea while going in. Thank you very much. I hope I made some sense today.
Yes, Martin, it was really very interesting. And meanwhile, while I'm still talking to you, I request all the people who are logged in to put in their questions, observations, or whatever in the chat box, and we'll take them one at a time. Now, I was wondering how the theater or the plays written by Butake, how do they connect with the other playwrights in Africa, for instance, Wole Soyinka? And on a larger scale, how would it relate to theater being practiced in Africa and in other parts of the world?
Thank you. In fact, for some reason, when I woke up this morning,
There's one more point. You see, there's a difference between writing plays and acting them out. So, between the playwright and the theater person, was there any connection? Meaning, were his plays staged? And how popular did they become? We would like to know about that also.
yes, his plays were staged. And he was very well known in Cameroon. He was actually now, ever since he passed away about 6, 7 years ago, many other many other countries in Africa actually stage his plays. He's becoming pretty well known, at least in the African circles. And I was just reading just before, surprise, surprise, I was actually reading an article just before this talk today. And in Sheffield, in England, here, just about an hour away from where I am, the Crucible Theatre is actually putting up a play, a Wallace Shrinker play, Death and the King's Husband. It'll be running from the 2nd to the 8th of February in Sheffield. So if you're in England and have a chance to go to watch it, the reason I say that is because these are the kind of plays that af affect how Butake wrote. Because uh, um, Death and the King's Husband was first published in 1975.
Mhm.
Lake God was first published in 1986, so only about 10 years later. So, and it was put up. He was when it first came out, he wrote it and he directed it on stage. And as I said, I actually acted in it as an actor. I was the first main actor in it. So yes, these plays were actually put up in the proscenium, and they were actually staged. Now, but one of the things that Butake also did at the time was sometimes he used Boal tactics in writing plays, which is basically you can write a play, you come up with a play, you perform it before you actually write it out. So uh, uh, I hope that answers your question, but also in a wider perspective, his plays, I have put up his plays myself as director when I was in the College of William and Mary. So his plays can be performed on stage, can be set, and depending on how the director wants to approach it, you can use what kind of, in all these modernistic approaches to play, to directing these days on stage. But yeah, his plays are like that.
There is a question that's come in from Professor Manfred, and she says, could you give us some more details about the rituals? They sound very interesting. The rituals that you spoke about.
Yes.
You said that
Um,
rituals keep them together. Rituals keep the
yes.
community together. You said something like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting that she should ask that question because believe this or not, for when I did my master's many years ago, I did it on ritual in in communities in Cameroon, and depending on what community you're from, there are certain traditions and rites that can be performed, and so and being from India, you will really understand this fast and better. I'll give you an example. Uh, the crowning, the making of a chief. There are certain secret societies that when you go into, you never know who can be a member or who are members of these societies, but they will have a secret place where they will go and a secret stone, or sometimes it's in the lake, and that's why you see the lake is important, or it could be in a secret grove. So if you read like God, these things are there, and there are certain kind of leaves that you will use for this particular traditional rite to cleanse somebody who will then become the chief. Or if a baby is born, there are other kind of rituals that will be performed on the woman
Mm-hmm.
before she gives birth, after she
Mm-hmm.
gives birth, to ensure that everything goes well. Because you want to remember that there used to be a high rate of mortality 120 years ago among women
Mm-hmm.
when they gave birth to children. So it was a big deal. And so there will be certain traditional rites that are performed. Um, Sometimes, again, animals could be used to perform these rites: chicken, sheep, goats, cows, and blood is very animal blood, that is very significant in some cleansing rituals. Now, what I'm actually doing is I'm just giving you guys an overview, but if you came to
Mm-hmm.
Cameroon, you would have to go to each little community, which is about 20, 30,000 people, to find out their rituals. You have some people who believe in the sanctity of the snake. You have some people who believe in the sanctity of the gorilla. You have some people who believe in the sanctity of cattle. You have some people who believe in the sanctity of sheep as the sacred animal of a
Mm-hmm.
people. And being Indians, you definitely understand that very quickly. And so it all depends on the community. And then if you step out of Cameroon to Nigeria, to Gabon, to Senegal, to each African country, you would have a variety, and they could say to you, what Martin said in his lecture, yes, it makes sense, but among my people, this is what we do. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't like, much as I like using the word Africa, I like using it because it makes things a little bit less difficult for me to explain. But I'm one of those people who have certain theories about the word Africa. It's such a general term for me, and it's such a massive continent with so many different variety of people and cultures and places that whenever I use the
Mm-hmm.
word Africa, it kind of like is a canopy word. And you may meet somebody else who will tell you something totally different, and yet still makes a lot of sense. So, depending on where you are, would you find the kind of ritual that is significant among the people of that community and how they practice it? It will be different, which I understand and like, as a matter of fact.
Now, Martin, there are lots of questions that have come up. If you have a paper and pen, maybe you can jot them down and answer whatever you feel comfortable
Okay,
with.
now
Yes.
Do I have a paper and pen? Oh, can you give me a second while I see if I have something?
Yes, yes, yes. Uh, I would forward them all to you, but I don't know how to go about it. Um, there are quite a few of them.
Okay, I think I do have.
Okay, Martin, I've sent them all to you. I've sent them all to you, and
Oh,
so you can have a look. And
okay. All right. Somebody says, Dr. Utam. Oh, no, let me
can you
go
see
up a
that?
little bit. Yeah, the first I see here is from Dr. Thapa from Nepal.
Uh, you
Please
have
tell
people, you
us.
have some people logged in from Nepal, you have somebody
Yeah.
who's logged in from the West Indies, and
Okay.
there are, yeah, other places also.
Yeah, so please tell us more about the role of the body in ritual in Africa. Let me start with Dr. Thapa Hukum from Nepal. Again, uh, Dr. Thapa, Africa is pretty large. In Cameroon, for instance, there are just very few societies that use the body in ritual. But I do know, having studied ritual from other African communities, that many people in Africa believe in the sanctity of the earth, that the earth, Mother Earth, is very sacred. And so the body, sometimes you have some communities like the Yoruba would make some marks on the face. They'll make some marks on the face or on the cheek, and each of these marks there's a reason for that on the body. Also, there's something among the Yoruba in Nigeria, some of the communities they're called Obanje. So what that is that sometimes a woman could have a child, and after about a year, the child dies, and then she gets pregnant again. If you read Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, there's a story like that where this woman keeps on having a child and the child keeps on dying. In response to Dr. Thapar, sometimes when you have a situation like that, they make a mark on the body. They make so if the child dies and if the woman has a child again and they see those marks on the body, they know that it's an obanje and they know that a certain ritual has to be performed. Now, that is not really big in Cameroon, but in some other African societies, you will find that. I hope I answered his question to a little bit for his liking there. Now I go to Yakub Ad Adikari. And it says, Dr. Martin, many thanks for your insightful presentation. My question is, Shoinka tries to present African worldviews about life, death, and life, about life, death, afterlife, and the relationship between the dead and the living. Great. How does Butaka worldview daily differs from Shoinka's views? All right, let me start with that one first, Iyadab. If you remember earlier on, I said Butake wrote Lake God only about 10 years after Shoinka's last play, Death of the King's Horseman. So I will tell you that Butake was greatly influenced by Shoinka. There's no doubt about that. If you look at Lake God, for instance, even before the lake explodes, the traditional priest is already telling people about the afterlife and that they are not ready for the afterlife. As you say here, and you rightfully say, most religions in Africa are what we call cyclical, as opposed to like Islam or Christianity, which is what we call linear. So, in other words, in Christianity, at the very least, you're born, you live, and you die, and you have a spirit which goes to heaven, etc. That's putting it very simply. But in many African situations, as you see in Shoinka's works, it's cyclical, which means you're born, you live, you die, and you come back again. So in naming, for instance, like my name personally, I was named after my grandfather because when I was born, it is believed that my grandfather has come back. So when you listen to the names of people, naming is very big. And so if you look at Butake's late god, he's asking you, how does Butake's worldview daily differ from Shoinka's worldview? I won't really say it differs. If anything, I would say it's similar to Shoinka's worldview, um, in the whole cyclicalness of death. But it differs in the sense that he comes at it from his own people, from his own community. And so, for instance, in Shoinka, he deals more with the god of iron and the god of fire. But in Butake, the water is more important. But that is still performing the same role. Yes, Professor.
We have just about 10 minutes left, and you've been talking
Oh,
about Butake, but we also want to know about Martin Fusi. So please wrap up all these questions in the next couple of minutes so that we can ask you about your work.
okay. Oh my goodness, there's some very good. He just very quickly, he's asking about Shrinka, also tries to re-theorize Aristotelian elements of theater. Does Butake align with this? Very quickly, if you Yoda, check out Boal, Augusto Boal. He, and also the whole question I was talking about, theater of the oppressed. Butake is a very, very strong student of theater of the oppressed. So in a certain way, he even questions Aristotelian theory in a certain way. I would have loved to, that's a good question I would have loved to go into in more detail, but I'll have to, there are more questions I want to approach. For Bharati Kaimer, how do you connect Chinua Achebe and Wole Soyinka as far as rituals in African society is concerned? Very quickly, Barati, both Chinua and Soyinka are from Nigeria, but Chinua is Igbo and Soyinka is Yoruba. So they both come at ritual from an Africanist perspective. They both believe in ritual, but as Igbo people and Yoruba people approach rituals from different perspectives. Again, remember I said earlier on that Africa is very big, so you could meet somebody who prepares ritual, who believes in ritual a certain way, but is questioned by somebody else who believes in ritual a certain other way. So that would give you a whole idea about that. For Dr. Uttam Panduran, can you please throw light on the contribution of Community to Community Education and Cultural Center of Reshaping African Theater? I've actually heard of that. It's Kenyan, and it deals with theater for development, and it deals with the whole idea of conscientization and mobilization, getting people in the village community into action to make their communities better. Please also comment on women playwrights. In Ghana, for instance, you have Ama Ataido, who has written some very good work. Again, she's like Butake in the sense that she deals with ritual and politics, but from a Ghanaian perspective, rather than from a Cameroonian perspective. And also, she talks about the role of women uh, there. So check out Ama Ata Aido from Ghana. And then, what are the challenges of African theater? This is one of them right here. Um, you know, each time I go out and talk about African theater, many people are very interested, but know very little about it because we haven't had the opportunity to. What we need to do now is externalize it, have plays, have talks like this. Many people don't have this opportunity to talk about African theater. Why would rituals keep a society together? I think I answered that very quickly. Many rituals in traditional societies, and this is Garima Nehra, demand sacrifice of women, etc. If rituals are necessary to keep a society together, can they go hand in hand with progressive thought? I personally, I will answer that from a personal perspective. I think yes, they can go hand in hand with progressive thought. There are, and this is something we have to be very careful about. I don't know of any, but I would think maybe they are, but I don't know of any community, at least in Cameroon, where the demand sacrifice of women, or and by that I mean if you like sacrifice women. I know about sacrification of animals to cleanse a community in rituals, but I don't know about women. Maybe there is, but I don't think in Cameroon, where I've done a lot of studies. Maybe there are other African countries where it happens. And then let me go to Namrata Nistranda. The talk reminds me of Achebe's Things Fall Apart. Thank you very much for introducing, and thank you very much, Namrata. And then to Gonal Bakay, can you please comment on Olunde's suicide at the end of who? Uh, Professor, I have to take 1 minute from my time to say, because that's a very important point. My comment there is exactly what I'm
She
talking,
has
because
logged in from Turkey. She's logged in from Turkey, by the way.
from Turkey. Oh my goodness. Yeah, my comment there is that Olunde is the son of he is the educated person who came back from England when he knew his father, he knew his father had to commit what we call the personal ritual, which is basically kill himself to cleanse his society. So Olunde comes in and he wants to continue that ritual. He feels that his community will fall apart, things will fall apart, using Achebe's title, obviously, if that ritual is not performed. So he had to kill himself in place of his father because his father was reluctant to do it. It had nothing. Many people think it's like a whole westernization and a colonization thing against, sorry, westernization versus tradition. No, it's a man who, death of a sales, death and the king's husband is a tragedy. So this guy has a weakness and he has a new wife. He's a polygamist. He has a new wife and he wants to enjoy his new wife, but he has to kill himself. So when his son comes back and sees that the father is still alive, the son kills himself. And of course, the father then kills himself. So Olunde believes that he has cleansed his society of the ills that would have come. And I
Mhm.
think that was the last question there. I probably think I have a few more minutes, as Professor said, to
But Martin, we would like you to talk about what you have been working on and what your passions are.
thank you.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's very obvious that you're so much into theater, but I know that you have other interests which I would like you to share with our audience.
thank you very much, Professor. Yes, I am. I just finished writing a book which is due for publications in the next couple of months, and it's a fantasy slash it's a fantasy work that is set somewhere in Africa 2, 3 thousand years ago, and it's about this little man who somehow is transported from contemporary America. This little man with Cameroonian parents, who finds himself in Africa of many centuries ago, and the adventures that he has to rescue the people of this society from some invaders who come in all the time. And it's kind of like my own. It's a narrative, and it's called Quest for Quiffon, and it's book one. And it's a fantasy work I've written for like teenagers, 16, 20 and above. And it records the adventures of this little person and what he sets out to do. But it is a but when you look at it, for me, it's a comment on contemporary Africa, on Africa as I see it and what is going on today. But I decide to go to the past, many centuries ago, to explain the present today. And hopefully, Professor will know about the book when it comes out, and I hope she will tell you about it. And in the same breath,
Tell
yes,
us
you can
about
tell.
it. You will tell us about it in another session. When the book comes
Yes,
out,
I
you are going to
definitely will. I definitely will.
tell us. Yeah.
Um, And also, still in response to Professor's question, I do, of course, as you can tell, I'm passionate about theater. I'm also passionate about film. I myself, I'm a well trained actor. I trained both in Cameroon in African theater, but I also trained in Stratford. I'm a fully trained Shakespearean actor. In Stratford, you know, the whole Stratford Shakespeare thing. I trained with the
Who's your
Shakespeare
who's your favorite who's
company.
your favorite Shakespearean character?
It has, I'm sorry to say this, but it has to be the character that I played. The most important Shakespearean character I ever played was Mark Anthony in Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. That was so for me, it's just me. Yeah, it's my most important character because I played him.
Wow.
But I also have a background in film. I studied under the late Oscar-winning director Anthony Minghella. If you've watched movies like The English Patient or The Talented Mr. Ripley, he was the director of such movies. He was my professor. So I do, in fact, as we speak, I'm working on a major movie. I'm directing it. We may be shooting late. We will definitely be shooting later this year in California, and I'm looking forward to that. So as Professor once told me, Martin, you have your hands everywhere. Try to focus on one. But I
Very
try.
interesting. I would invite all of us to switch on our videos so that Martin can see everybody. Come on. Yeah. At one
Okay.
point we were about 36 or 37 people logged in, but some have dropped out by now, and the
Yes,
rest are
I
here.
still see. I'm trying to minimize you, Professor, because I can only see.
You go to the top right, you have view out there. So you click on view and you click on gallery under it.
uh. Oh, hey, there you are. Oh, hi, everybody. I
Yeah,
see
yeah.
everybody now.
So some of them
Oh,
have switched on videos and others have
oh,
not. And
thank
you
you.
can
I
see
didn't
that
realize there were so many people.
they were close to 40 at one time.
Good heavens.
Yeah.
Blimey, that I didn't realize. I thought there were only about 10. It's so such a
Mhm.
pleasure meeting you all. I feel very humbled.
And some
I'll
of
say
them are
that
very
very
senior.
quickly.
Some of them are very senior. You have Meenakshi Paul here. Hi, Meenakshi. She's a senior professor in Himachal Pradesh, Shimla. We have Vivek Sachdeva. Hi, Vivek. He's from Delhi. There he is. Then we have, well,
Hi.
we have people from, yeah, we have Yadav Adhikari from Nepal. And let's see who else is here.
Oh, hello,
Bharati
Yadav. I see you
Kenar.
now. I see you.
Yeah.
Hello,
And we have Anil. We have Anil Prasad, who had looked in
Yeah.
from another part of India.
Hello,
Um,
Anil. I see you. Such a pleasure.
yeah,
I'm humbled. Thank you very much.
hello, sir.
Oh, oh, there you are.
yeah.
Is this
Yes,
Dashan Kumar?
yes, there is
Sir,
one Darshan Kumar here.
it was
Okay.
nice to meet you.
Right.
I'm very
So
lucky to have interaction with you.
Thank you very much. I'm humbled as well. Thank you for coming to this talk. And I don't think I'll ever forget today in a very long time. I don't think I will. I really appreciate your presence. And it gives me, I really feel humbled and I just don't know what to say. I thank you so much. I feel honored as well. It's been an honor.
the recording is going to be uploaded on YouTube, and the link will be shared with everyone. And as I said, this is the first of our talks. We plan to have them regularly, at least once a fortnight. And we do have a long list of speakers who are keen on sharing their interests with others. So let's look forward to all this. And meanwhile, Martin, thank you so much. Anything that you would like to say to the audience before we say goodbye?
I want to take this opportunity once again to thank you all for coming. I feel honored. I feel humbled. I don't know. I met Professor by a stroke of luck in California. It did not occur to me that I'd be here talking to such a distinguished panel of guests and academics. Uh, I'll call my mother back home and we'll do a little ritual. This has been a very big day for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin, and we look forward to having you with us again, perhaps when your book comes out. And I would like
Definitely,
to thank
Professor.
everybody else, everybody else who logged in today. Please stay tuned for our future events too. So thank you
Thank
and
you.
good night, everyone.
Good
Bye-bye.
night, everyone, and thank you. Thank you
Thank
very